Our first priority is the safety of New Zealanders. Our months-old advice to New Zealanders in Iran and Israel remains to leave if and when they can find a safe route. And by the way, to hear some media carrying the fact that we have not helped our people or warned them is a disgrace, given that for months we've said to leave, and yet they never carried that message to New Zealanders wishing to warn their cousins or friends offshore. What New Zealanders are looking for in the Middle East and what we oppose. We want the de-escalation and dialogue. We want a two-state solution with Israelis and Palestinians living in security and peace side by side. We want humanitarian aid to get to those who need it. And ultimately, we want peace. What we do not want is New Zealand and New Zealanders in harm's way. We don't want ever-escalating rounds of military action. We do not want a nuclear Iran. And we don't want Hamas holding hostages and terrorising Palestinian and Israeli citizens alike. And we do not want Israel occupying Palestinian land. And ultimately, we do not want another generation of young people in the Middle East scarred by conflict, replicating the enmities of today and yesterday. This cycle of conflict, now generations old, must end. Mr. Speaker, the Middle East is a long, long way from New Zealand, and our influence is limited. But the government is committed to doing all we can to help New Zealanders affected and to help contribute to de-escalation and diplomacy. Thank you.
Article 2.4 of the United Nations Charter prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state unless, as Article 51 states, it is in self-defence or authorised by the Security Council. Neither of those conditions has been met. There is no clear justification, there is no credible claim of imminent threat, and there is no UN mandate. And that makes those strikes contrary to international law. And that's not just my opinion, Mr. Speaker, that's an opinion shared by legal scholars, human rights organisations, and former diplomats around the diplomatic world.
14 bunker buster bombs weighing 15 tons each were dropped on 3 Iranian nuclear sites.
My biggest fear would be for Iran to own and be able to use and deploy a nuclear weapon. It would be a stranglehold on Israel, on the whole region and other parts of the world. And that is why NATO has said Iran should not, and this is a consistent position of NATO, Iran should not have its hands on a nuclear weapon. So, and I would not agree that this is against international law what the US did. So, and I would not agree that this is against international law what the US did.
What does the law say about the president being allowed to authorize a strike like we saw?
It was President Obama that was able to do airstrikes in Libya. President Clinton did the same with Sudan. So when it comes to the law, the question is whether the president has the possibility to come to Congress before acting. Well, here I would argue that in this strike, it was top secret. The president was working with Israel, and going to Congress could have risked the success of the mission and also put military lives at risk. First, Article 2 of the Constitution gives the president broad powers as commander-in-chief of the military. Second, there has been legal opinions out of the Justice Department talking just about that the president has broad authority to act in quickly and swiftly in matters of national security. And that's just what we saw from President Trump.
Mr. Speaker, I have a couple of questions for the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Noting that Article 51 on the right to self-defence states specifically that that right is inherent for individual or collective self-defence if an armed attack occurs against a member of the United Nations, does the New Zealand government believe that the US's preemptive strike on Iran meets that criteria?
Speaker, in the context in which the Leader of the Opposition asked that question, we note the United States' decision to undertake targeted attacks aimed at degrading Iran's nuclear capabilities was based on the US statement to the UN Security Council that it was acting in collective self-defence consistent with the UN Charter. That was a statement they made, and of course, in time, that will depend on the emerging evidence.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, the Right Honourable Chris Hipkins.
The Minister may not have heard my question to him. My question was, does the New Zealand Government believe that the preemptive strike meets the criteria of Article 51?
Well,
As I said, Mr Speaker, unlike some, we wait till we get the evidence. And we've said it constantly, day after day, that instead of rushing to judgment, as we were asked this morning by the media, has peace broken out? No, we said we're going to trust but verify. And when we sought to verify, we found what they were saying by way of questioning was wrong. And in this case, we're going to find out the facts as time goes by. There'll be some days yet before, maybe sometime yet, before we can establish as to the immediacy of the problem and the level of deterioration with respect to the Iran position on gaining nuclear capability in terms of weapons.
Is it the New Zealand Government position that that Article 51 permits the use of preemptive force?
It is the, in fact, international position that if justified, then that is why it's recognised in the UN. Exactly why it's written that way.
Has the New Zealand Government received intelligence supporting the claim that the US strike was in line with Article 51?
As we have said before, we have not been privy to that information, nor did we, frankly, expect to be, but we have made the wise decision, in my view, to hold our counsel until we know all the facts before we rush into judgment. We rush to judgment and peril the future of 5.2 million New Zealanders, and more importantly, the people over there in Iran right now, which the numbers have escalated from 46 just 2 days ago to now to 134, that we have to get out. That's our number one priority, and we're going to have that in our mind before we make any rash statement that it might affect their safety getting out.
Will the New Zealand Prime Minister use his presence at NATO on behalf of our country this week to urge for restraint, de-escalation and adherence to international rules by all countries?
I will contact the Prime Minister and pass on the Leader of the Opposition's message, and I think the response to that is the Minister of Defence says he always does.
Finally, Mr Speaker, when the government commits to the two-state solution, as he did in his ministerial statement, does that mean it will now take steps to formally recognise Palestine by inviting the ambassador to present their credentials? And if not, why not?
Well, Mr Speaker, the trouble with that is, and we have said countless times, that it's not when it comes to recognising Palestine, if but when. But having spoken to the Palestinian Authority, having spoken to the Egyptians, having spoken to the Emirates, having spoken to the President of Turkey, having spoken to the President of Indonesia, these huge Islamic countries and others, and they understand our view. We've said, but how will we actually recognise it and maintain the standards of recognition which we've always held thus far? Or we're going to lower the standard, and then the next time it happens, we've got a much lower base and precedent that we'll come to regret. That's the position that a lot of countries share with us. It's not if, but when, and when is when we know we'll have the authority legitimately capable of making the claim that they are the representatives of the people.